Hi, book club members. I'm Jen.
And I'm Carrie.
And this is Warhammer 40k Book Club, where we read from a crag. This is episode number 92. In our
Oh,
books.
sorry. Oh, heavy.
It is so heavy. This is such a beefy book. Is War of the Fang by Chris Wright. The book is actually a combination of The Hunt for Magnus and Battle of the Fang. We posted several questions on our website, WH40kbookclub.com, and we encourage participation in our discussions via YouTube, our site, or Encrypted Vox channel. Spoiler warning for like really old books. If you haven't yet read the books, definitely go check them out first and then come back to this post as we're going to be discussing the book from start to finish in great detail.
Well,
With that,
to be fair,
let's.
we had read it, so.
So, funny story about that actually. Halfway through Battle of the Fang, I was like, oh, we did read this book. And my husband was like, I told you that. But like, I swear to God, I remembered like 3 things from the book. It's just been like, it hasn't even been like that long, but I was like, oh yeah, it was kind of a new adventure for me. I imagine this is what it's going to be like someday when I eventually get dementia. Every day's going to be a new day. Every book will be new. So we're going to spice it up a little bit tonight since this is technically 2 books. But let's start with, did you like this book?
I did. I wasn't sure I was going to, but I did.
Because it's very Space Wolfy, and I know you were a little hesitant to read it. Well, I really did enjoy both stories.
The sun's cracked me up, so
there's a lot going on there. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I love so heavy. I really liked the special edition. I was like, as soon as they showed this, like for their preview, I was like, oh, I'm gonna be owning that book for sure. That's gorgeous. And I had never, honestly, if it weren't for this book, I never would have read The Hunt for Magnus. I remember when that story came out, I was like, meh, I don't care, because I don't really like Magnus very much, and so I was glad this actually made me read it, and I was like, oh, that was actually a pretty good story because it. We'll get into there in a second because. Huh?
Magnus wasn't really even in it, so.
There's that. It dealt with 2 things I really liked. But let's start with, do you think these 2 stories, like, do you understand why they combined them? Did you think they pieced well into one narrative?
Yes. Because Hunt for Magnus set the foundation for Battle of the Fang. So 100%.
Reading them, as I bled into Battle of the Fang and kept reading it, I actually was kind of struck by people read this without Hunt for Magnus in the front.
I mean,
like,
I guess.
That actually, but like that struck me because I was like, that, I agree with you completely. It basically was like, it was like the foundation for which the rest of the house gets built on. I can't imagine the 2 stories separate.
I can't either because I don't think you would fully understand Ironhelm's obsession.
Right? And you wouldn't really understand, I don't think you would really understand Ironhelm in general. Not just his obsession, but a lot of, and I think it also kind of explains, because like, apparently Ironhelm is actually like, he's entombed in a way that like is a cautionary tale for space wolves, for psychers, right? For the rune priests, basically is like, yeah, don't trust whatever you hear in the warp. It ain't trustworthy. This guy's our textbook case of this, right? I feel as though this definitely explains why, and it gives you a lot of it gives you a lot of more understanding for why the wolves have some of the opinions they do in the 40k universe. What parts of Hunt for Magnus stood out to you?
Oh, one thing I really enjoyed about reading this in the 32K was that it's so funny because they act like the heresy was so long ago, and I'm just like, it's just 1,000 years ago, but because I'm so used to the 40K where it's 10,000 years ago. And it's kind of interesting, even in that 1,000 years, like what gets lost just in that 1,000 years. So, one thing I really, honestly, what I really enjoyed in it is when Ironhelm, when they get to where he thinks Magnus is, and there's that one sorcerer, and he hears the sorcerer's voice. He's like, "Why are you after me?" He's like, "Oh, did you really think this was about you?" Like, classic sons.
Classic Sons. So you touched on something that I like about this book. So one of the weird things about 40k is that we see the heresy, which is where there's two parts of the heresy, or actually it's technically 3 acts of the heresy. We're all buddies. Oh wait, we're not all buddies. Wait, are you my buddy or are you not my buddy? And those guys are awful. We're all buddies. And then we see 40k, which is the traitor legions are known. The traitor legions, like the Thousand Sons wear blue. They show up. They've got these rubrics. It's kind of weird and kind of tragic, but whatever. I love this particular part of history where, oh, Magnus, like, I think Magnus is still alive. Magnus is dead, fool. And like when they first find the rubrics, right? And they're like, no, 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 the Thousand Sons wear red.
Well, I that, but just like the rubrics they confused them. And I was like, is this the first time that anyone's ever seen them? Because that's kind of cool to read about. Because I imagine it'd be like, why won't these things die? And when they finally do, it's like, there's nothing in it. Is dust coming out? That's just weird.
I thought that was such a nice flavor piece. Because
Yeah.
Chris Wright has always done interesting little flavor things in all of his books, right? Like there's the whole thing about vellum in
Right.
Was that in the Vaults of Terror or in the Watchers of the Throne? I can't remember
I
which, but he
don't
does that
remember.
whole thing on vellum and you're like, "Oh wow." Or when he talks about, I think it's in Vaults of Terror when he talks about how like if one supply ship is like an hour late, a million people starve on Terra. Like he always throws these cool things and that was such a neat flavor thing. But it's like, "Oh my god. You guys don't even know. You don't
Right.
even know what these things are yet." That's fun.
Yeah. So that to me was a lot of fun. And it's honestly, it was really interesting. I made a note here, page 29, that it was really interesting to look into the state of the Imperium as a whole, because you have these people that are still stuck in the past with the heresy, because it was, like I said, only 1,000 years ago. And I'm very sad that Bjorn's already a dreadnought. I was like, maybe Bjorn's still around. No, man, he's already a dreadnought. That sucks. All right.
A young dreadnought at that point. Like he's not this venerable, like, go and awaken Bjorn. Like he's
Right.
more like, ah, go wake him up.
Right. Right.
You know
So
what I mean? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
where they still remember him as like the first, great wolf after Lehman Russ. So that's kind of cool, especially since I haven't finished the heresy. I actually didn't know Bjorn was the first great wolf, so I was like, oh, that's kind of a little cool thing for me to learn. Um, but so you have those people that are like still stuck in the past, and then you have the other faction that's just like, we can't focus on that. We got problems now. Like we got Xenos that we need to purge out of here. We can't be chasing these ghosts when we have something more.
When they were talking about the greenskins.
Yeah, we have something
you're
more
like,
tangible right here.
well, and it opens up that interesting question of self-fulfilling prophecy,
Mm-hmm.
where they're like, dude, the greenskins are at our door. And Ironhelm's like, don't care. Magnus is still alive. What happens if you don't listen to the voice in the warp?
Well, and it kind of shows like how much he was not listening to their own sagas. Which makes me wonder. It's like, man, what is Casper doing? Oh, he exited stage
I want everyone
left.
to know that is the $50,000 question.
Yes, because he
for
got
me.
interred, with the dreadnoughts as a human. I still don't know why. Like, because and
I interred him more because it was like, look, you've seen some shit.
maybe.
Like, we need to make sure you don't get into other people's hands, and you did do us a valuable service, and I almost feel like he was also kept as kind of a cautionary tale, but I
But
want
nobody
everyone to
knows
know,
about him. And nobody and
like, Bjorn's probably literally the only person who does.
but he was the one. So like that's one of the things to talk about with things getting forgotten. But they're all obsessed with that Magnus is still around. because they don't know, because of Casper or whatever, that they did Magnus and the Sons wrong. They listened to the traitor, who they didn't know was a traitor at the time, and totally, killed a whole bunch of people for no reason. So they were just obsessed with that. It was like, well, but that's who the Wolf King went after. So we have to make sure that they're eradicated. It's like, no, you don't know your own sagas. You don't know your own stories, because Casper has been interred and his sagas never got to be written with the other Skalds. But so Magnus is able to use that obsession, but of course Magnus, I don't know, it's weird with Magnus too, right? Which I know we're going to get more into that with Battle of the Fang, like his motivations with this whole thing. But I don't even know where I'm going with this. Yeah.
It's interesting to see how, like, so one of the things I found very interesting about that story is that, okay, why? So outside of Horus telling them to go and destroy the Thousand Sons, why were they beefing with the Thousand Sons, and why did they believe that that this was a legit order to begin with? It's because the warp was dangerous. Some of the loyalist legions were using it, but not to the degree the Thousand Sons were. Like, they didn't have buddies from the warp that just ran around everywhere, that even if the loyalists were like, this feels weird. Like, they were abusing the warp and psychers, right? And so, like, abusing their powers, not physically abusing them. So to your point, it's interesting to me that Ironhelm was like, oh, we've got to go and chase them down. There's a strange voice in the warp, like in my dreams, that's talking to me, and I'm gonna listen to it. Like, you never stopped to be like, no, wait a minute. Why were we beefing with the Thousand Sons to begin with? Like, again, the stuff that's already been forgotten, and it's been 1,000 years.
Right.
Like, on one hand, yeah, like, I challenge you to actually discuss anything in real great detail from 1,000 years ago in human history. Spoiler, it's very scant. However, like, in the 480k universe, that's nothing. 1,000 years is like 10 years ago. And yeah, watching this guy who's just like, oh no, I believe the voice in my dream. Like, I trust this. Like, this at the end of the day, so much trust put into this. And for why? And then to your point too, when he was talking about, like, when they first see the rubrics and they're like, no. I have seen a picture of them. They were red. Like, because the All Holy Archive says they're A, dead, and B, they were red. Like, I found that scene, I was like, what am I reading? Again, it's just so much is lost. And I know that the beginning of every book says that, but for real though.
Well, it's, also part of his obsession is when they found that cult. And, and they're like, you can't stop it. He is everywhere. I think it's like a quote on the back of the book is actually from that quote. Yeah, he lives, son of rest. Like, it will never leave you. And he's just like, wait, what? He's still alive? He's having this dream? He's like, oh my God, he is still alive. We have to finish what our father started. It's like, no, you really don't. You don't, because you don't know exactly what the purpose of that was. You weren't there. You don't know. You didn't get the order. You didn't hear everything that happened after.
I don't even think they really understood that he was a demon prince at this point. So,
I'm not sure what they knew. They just knew traitor.
So, like,
this new traitor, and our dad and our father went after them. And so therefore,
by God, we're going to too. But the funny thing is that, like, okay, like, the 40k guys, I get it. He's a demon prince. This needs to be stopped. You cannot have this guy running around. But I don't really get the impression that he knew. Like, I don't think he knew that Magnus was not going to appear like the Magnus that Leman Russ knew.
No, I think they all expected, like, the Primarch.
It's a guy.
It's
like a Primarch dude who's gonna show up and be like, look at me, I'm all mystical and stuff. Not quite.
Because they knew that Russ broke his back. But I guess there was a skipping of, like, why didn't he kill him then? Like, where did he go? that got left out, how he abandoned his corporeal body to create the planet of the sorcerers. That all got left out, so you think it's just a guy, which is another reason why I think the rubric confused them. They're like, what, what is this? This doesn't even make any sense.
Be fair, I loved that scene too because the rubrics are very concerning, let's say. Um, it's the one thing about the Thousand Sons that I really do find interesting are the concept of the rubric marines. We've seen them utilized in such great stories. Like I think about oh, what is that? Mark of Faith, where the guy's just like the Thousand Son is like, I just wanted to hear my best friend's voice again. And in Black Legion, how every now and then a scander would be like, wait a minute, there was a ghost of sentience? No, no, never mind.
Well, it
Um,
was also in Black Legion when one of them was killed, and it spoke to him and told him to run. It's like, oh shit.
the rubrics are rubric. No, they're an interesting little puzzle. And I know you and I have talked about that whenever they show up in books, how they're really starting to lay the framework in a lot of these books that the Thousand Sons don't even really understand what's going on with these guys.
No.
There's something weird there. Um, I liked that. I love that concept about them, and I really did like getting to see the wolves. Like, what is that? That's not right.
Right?
So we've talked a little bit about Ironhelm's obsession. Like, do you understand it? Does that make him a good leader, a reckless leader? Like,
I understand a little bit, but it doesn't make him a good leader.
I was actually kind of struck by how. So for the guy who's like, and I keep going back to that scene because it was like, whoa, the guy who's like, Magnus is alive, Magnus is alive, Magnus is alive. When they're like, I think these dusty guys, I think these are Thousand Sun Space Marines. Nope, 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 nope. Bruh, like, what do your eyes tell you? Like, he definitely was a little pig-headed when people would try to tell him stuff. He's like, nope, I have decided nah. Did not make him. It made him very wolfy, but not necessarily a great leader.
Well, I mean, Logan Grimnar, who's next to Bjorn, is probably the best Great Wolf existence. Like, yes, he's very pig-headed too. We've seen it several times, but at the same time, he's very knowledgeable and
Mhm.
is wise in how he will like take in information. You know, Ironhelm is not, for lack of a better word, and it's just because of this obsession, and he can't let it go. He's like he's going to go off of what he knows about the Thousand Sons because that is what the sagas have, and therefore nothing has changed. Well, not even think about a lot has happened. Like they keep saying it was 1,000 years ago, but at the same time, it's like, but everything is frozen in time, right? Well, which is it?
Yeah, exactly. There's an interesting dichotomy
Yeah.
to the 32 M32 world that you're absolutely correct that they live in a state of where nothing has changed and everything has changed. And I find that fascinating. That story, this whole book in general, makes me wish we got to see more things from the mid 30s. I've always said that I would love to see like the Age of Apostasy. I think that would make a great book series, right? Like going back and looking at some of these fledgling years where things are
Oh,
like the legend.
that's going to be after Siege of Terra.
Probably yes, but hopefully it doesn't become 9,000 books like the Horus Heresy.
Oh,
Um,
it will.
but I do like getting to see what it looks like in this pre 40k universe when they're in this weird like
Mm-hmm.
we don't really know where the traders are. All right, so let's talk about the beefier book in here, Battle of Fang. What part stood out to you?
What didn't? I mean,
Nothing.
I mean, well, I mean, there's lots of things that I liked in here. I wrote down a note here, like on page 151, where they're like, "We've never been ones for following the rules. Leave those to Gullum and Sons." I chuckled at that. And but my note I wrote there though, and yet they cling to their own tradition so fiercely. They say they
Very
don't
much
follow
so.
the rules, but they follow their own rules. So it's I don't,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of also when Blackwing got really like irritated whenever Nyman called him a space wolf. He's like, oh, we're the Vilka Fenrica. I was like, so snobby. Like, you're the only ones who call yourselves that. You realize that, right? Um,
They're really one of the only Space Marine chapters. Like, before I say that, I want to preface by saying that yes, a lot of the Space Marine chapters have their own language, but the Space Wolves are often presented as the only like the only major chapter that it's their language first and then Gothic. Um,
no,
Most of them it's
white
either equals or it's more Gothic than it is their own
white
language.
scars is the other.
That's the other.
White
Yes,
the
the
whites.
other feral boys.
So it's like, yeah, the white scars is so fascinating. Reading as much as I have about them in the Horus Heresy, go on ahead and drink, everybody. Is that they are set as like the pair, right? With the space wolves,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the same thing. Like they don't have, kind of like the space wolves. Like they don't have numbered companies. They,
Correct.
it's the Brotherhood of the Blood Moon or whatever. They don't have apothecaries. I forget what they're called over in the White Scars, but they don't have librarians. It's the Storm Seers. It's like the Rune Priests here, and uh, so so the only difference is that the White Scars don't care what other people call them or say about them, or the Space Wolves are just like, don't call us that. It's like, sorry, it's y'all versus everybody else. So
It's a difference in mentality, right? Because I
yeah,
always think about that one scene, and I can't remember what book it's in, but with Jagatai Khan when Fulgrim is kind of like teasing him about like, oh, we've never seen you, like you don't know anything
oh, it's
about me,
it's
like you
in
wouldn't know how to fight me.
The Scars book.
Yes.
Yes.
And he's like, and he says, he's like, everyone knows everything about you. Everybody knows everything about everyone else. I like nobody knowing anything about me. Like there's this, it's not pissiness per se. It's not like a total arrogance, but it is this kind of we don't need your approval. We don't want your approval. We don't care what you think about us. We probably don't think about you very much at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whereas the wolves are more of like you will know us, and they really do like that. I always think of that. I think it was in that third Space Wolf book by Chris Raitt where they're talking and he's just like, yeah, everyone knows the Holy Primarchs, right? Like everybody loves Sanguini. He's like, but if you're in a foxhole and you mention Lehman Russ, watch guardsmen burst out into a smile, right? Like knowing that guy's with them. They kind of like that, like brashness, right?
Mm-hmm.
It does occasionally make them like even I know the exact scene you're talking about. It's like, dude, what do you care what they call you?
Right.
Ultimately, like it's a weird note for them.
But probably the thing that stood out for me the most is that Nyman, the navigator, might have been my favorite character in this whole thing. I was very sad that he died because I liked the fact that he was actually brave and strong, and he constantly told Blackwing where to shove it. It was great because Blackwing annoyed the crap out of me. I mean, he was funny like in the end.
I was not a fan of him.
Like I really loved when he, got to Ironhelm and he was just like, "Wait, what more do you want me to say? I have all this like obviously I lied about all this. Do I need to say please?" Like that was kind of funny. But, you know, when Nyman like saved him, saved Blackwing, and he's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm saving your ass, you stupid bastard." Like, okay, he said that to a space wolf. That's awesome. I like this guy.
To be
Sad,
fair, he's speaking their language.
right? But another
I'm
line,
sure the Space Wolf at some part of him was like, not bad.
uh, there's several scenes like with Blackwing actually that I enjoyed, like when his threat against mutiny, what he said he was going to do with the mutineers. He was just going to plug their bodies in the holes in the hull. He's like, it won't do anything, but it'll make me happy. Like, that's kind of funny. Um, but his most insightful thing he said was the wolves were savage, not savages. I like that because the White Scars say that too. They're like, we're very civilized. But we fight savagely was the big thing with the White Scars. Because, and this one thing that Jekatai Khan told them all was that laugh when you're killing. Which is like, well, that's why they think you're a madman. But it's also
right.
part of it that he did that so that they could just keep up their happy mood. That's his big thing, was that everyone's jovial with the White Scars. Whereas the opposite, you got the Space Wolves who are very angry and get their heat up, their blood up when they fight.
Very much so. One of my favorite White Scars notes, not to divert too much far down that rabbit hole, but it was in the Jagatai Khan Primarch novel. He when he first comes to Terra, the Mechanicus like take him up and they're like, look at your ship, it's so shiny, and we've made you this wonderful battleship, and this will be your flagship, and here's all of its specs and features. Jagatai Khan kind of looks at it, and then he's like, you really think I must be stupid? Like, just because I am savage does not mean I am a savage. And he proceeds to be like, strip this, change this, change this, change this. I'm not stupid. Because they were kind of giving him like what he felt was like just kind of a milquetoast. Although when you're talking about a Gloriana class battle cruiser, like none of them are really milquetoast. But he's like, basically strip it down and make it fast. But you're right. There is this like anger to the wolves that kind of makes them fun in sometimes, but it also does mean that they're a really difficult bunch to deal with. And I think this book felt more of like the savage, but not quite so thumbing their nose at the Imperium, like the 40k guys are. Of course, a lot of shit has happened between this book and the 40k novels. Almost, an Inquisitor trying to kill the whole first founding chapter. Anyways, let bygones be bygones. I really liked the characterization in here. The biggest thing that stood out to me was the work with the Canis Helix.
That was some Fabius Bile shit going on.
It is. And
I had a huge problem with it.
Here's where I have a very mixed emotions on this. So in the Lehman Russ Primarch novel, which I don't have it near me, but I'm like 60% certain it's written by Chris Wright.
Oh, it is.
It's actually very good. I think it's my favorite Primarch novel I've read so far. There's the crux of the book is that people are turning into wolfins. And a lot of the captains get together and are like, oh man, we got to try and fix this. Like, we got to hide this. We got to hide this. And of course, it does not stay hidden. It gets revealed in front of the Dark Angels. And the Dark Angels are like, excuse me, what? And then it starts this huge fight. And then at the end, Lehman Russ is like, you dumb bastards. I always knew about the Wolfen. I know that our gene seed is unstable as hell. My father knows that it's unstable as hell. It's in the Emperor's plan. Particularly interesting to me, going back to a point you made earlier about them not really knowing their history, that this guy, who, yes, definitely was giving off Fabius Bile energy, is like, and on one hand, I'm going to be honest, I totally rooted for Magnus. I was like, that's fair. That was a fair revenge, which we'll talk more about later, but like, I was really turned off by the idea of him like fixing it. The whole time I was like, excuse you.
Because that's what Fabius Bile was all about too. It was improving upon the Emperor's work.
Oh, and where did that get him?
Cancer.
I'm waiting. Yeah, exactly. It got him having to clone himself.
Because
Bleh. have a little PTSD from reading all 3 of those books
Yep,
in a row.
a little.
Just a little, just a smidge. But Fabulous Bill, like, that guy's been doing this for like 10,000 years, and
He hasn't gotten anywhere.
I mean, to be fair, it took Belisarius Cawl 10,000 years to market improvement. But yeah, like,
But Belisarius Cawl
I
actually had the original plans. He
true,
was
to be
on
fair.
the team. He was on the Astartes team.
And it still
So
took him 10,000 years.
right.
Yeah. Well, but that whole, like, I can't even point to a specific scene at all. I was just like, every time they talked about it, I was like, no, 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 thank you. No, 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 thank you. I'm good. You don't want any of this. Trust me.
Yeah, so I couldn't tell exactly what he was doing, until the human, gosh, I can't remember his name, stumbled upon it, and I was like, oh, that's what we're doing? That is not cool. Like, that is no. No.
Well, and to your point, like, I mean,
No.
yeah, he's kind of doing this in secret.
Mhm.
And so, like, I am a firm believer that if you have to keep something secret, you probably know you're not supposed to be doing it.
Right.
Like, oh, no, but it's for the greater good of our people. Then why are you keeping it secret? Just
right.
asking. Just questions. Like, but what did you make overall of... So there was a little bit of a difference between the Hunt for Magnus wolves and the wolves of the Battle of the Fang. Like, overall, what did you think of where they're at, what they're doing, what they're struggling with? As you mentioned earlier, I know you kind of talked about earlier, but like with the Imperium, do they feel, or at least for me at least, I thought they didn't feel quite as much of, not pariahs, but outsiders as they do in the 40k universe.
Oh, I
Which I found
felt
interesting.
like they were at the start of being outsiders.
Very much so.
Like they just
Very much at the start.
Yeah, like they just they wanted to do their, and there's a a clash as well between, like I said earlier, with factions, with ones wanting to do their own thing and go after Magnus, and the other's like, no, we need to handle this other stuff. And I feel like there's still that same thing, with the wolves, obviously now with the 40k. Yes, they do come in and help, but they're not what they were in 30k, in that they're not at the beck and call like they used to be. They're all so proud, and they're, got their arms crossed and are all pouty like, we do, you can't tell us what to do. But do you guys forget that when the Emperor snapped his fingers, Leman Russ was right there to do whatever dirty work the Emperor wouldn't do? And y'all are sitting now on Fenris pouting and occasionally sending, companies out to help. But really, one of the last times I saw y'all do anything was that was outside of Fenris, was when y'all sent a great company to Cadia. Everything else, it's like when stuff's touching Fenris, like the Ragnar Blackmane novel, like the Emperor's Gift. That was stuff that was near Fenris, and they're around their system.
They are fiercely protective of the planets within their system, or the planets that they have given their word to. But it does make it interesting, because one of my all-time favorite Karn quotes is when Karn kind of talks about why the World Eaters, basically why they were always problematic for the Emperor. And one of the quotes he says is, he's talking about how they used to be,
Be the war,
they used to
yes,
be called
be the Warhounds.
the Warhounds, and he says, the wolves will always come to heel when called. In that regard, it is a mystery why they name themselves wolves. They are tame, collared by the Emperor, obeying his every word, but a wolf doesn't behave that way. And I do feel that now they are more wolfish. Whereas in the 30k universe, definitely more houndish.
Mm-hmm.
You were absolutely right. And it is interesting to start to see that coming to the forefront of this. We just kind of do our own, like, if you have sworn yourselves to us, or if we have given you a promise, men, we are there for you. If you have fought alongside us, we are there for you, looking at the Emperor's gift. Outside of that, maybe.
At the same time, like, I love the White Scars, but they do the exact same thing. So it's kind of a fun, I don't know, it's really kind of a fun dichotomy, and yet not a dichotomy between the two of them. Why I like one more than the other. I honestly, I personally find the wolves to be more petty. Um, I mean, like the Vilka Fenrica. Ugh, why do they always call us the space wolves? Okay. Um,
Because not everybody knows that Vilka Fenrica, which is just almost basically just wolf. Like
what? You saying that
exactly.
stuff in the 40k
It is
is not like like Corvus Corax? You saying that they do stuff like that? No,
right.
not my 40k.
What? Corvus Corax?
Or Card the
Who
Betrayer.
well, my particular favorite is Corvus Corax of the Raven Guard, whose parting words were nevermore.
Just in case you didn't get, his name is basically Raven of the Raven Guard.
Corvus Corax, common raven? Yeah, exactly. Like, what? Um It is not a subtle universe, okay? I'm not here to explain, to tell you that it is.
Like, I really love that the homeworld of the salamanders, who are the dark-skinned group, are from a planet called Nocturne. Really? I mean,
Yep.
really?
Because, well, actually, Nostromo's not a bad word for the Night Lords. But they one of the things about this that I do like, that kind of that start of it, but one of my biggest complaints about the wolves, to going to something that you mentioned, was that it really depends on who's writing them. The wolves can be like, I can't stand when Gav Thorpe writes them. He writes them very silly, very silly and petty.
But to me, Gav Thorpe he picks that one thing that I can't stand about the wolves and basically shows this is how they are. I'm like, yes, yeah, you're right. This is exactly how they are. But I can see
I
someone.
think he clearly hates the wolves. I
But
really
I
do.
can see how someone like you, who does love the wolves, is like, they're not that petty.
Right. Well, it's like if you had somebody who loved the Flash TV series and all you did was talk about Flashpoint. Just like, oh, let's talk about Flashpoint. Like, well, no, I mean, I there's other stuff that goes into it. And oh, really? Yeah. Did you really like when the Speed Force became sentient? Like, that's what
Okay, I'm gonna
Gav
stop
Thorpe reminds me of. He's
ranting
like,
to
oh,
you about this show. If you're just gonna throw it back at
it
me.
was it was just a random. It was just a totally random, like, I don't know, just a random example that came out of nowhere.
My
But you know what I'm
my
saying? Like,
eldest
it's
for everybody else, my oldest son is making me watch all of the Flash, the CW show. And there's a reason why
your
I
sweet
quit
summer heart.
there's a reason why I quit in the middle of season 3. I love the Flash. I still read the comics. And this show is killing me on the inside, and sometimes I text to Jen my woes and now she's just going to throw it back at me.
Well, but like, my point being that if somebody really enjoys something, but then like somebody else comes along and they're like, well, I don't, so I'm just gonna pick on those, like, those little gnarly bits and I'm gonna over exaggerate them, right? Um, I so I feel like sometimes they're presented as just being very silly and petty and brutish, and then other times it's more of like we're just gonna do what we want. Like, I feel like ADB always writes them as more of like a not trickster, but like ADB always writes them as kind of like a, do you want to go? We do whatever we want. Like, I think about the Emperor's Gift, right?
Yeah.
That scene when they kill
Man.
the Inquisitor,
God.
but he was very patient, right? He didn't like rah!
Oh
Like, I
no.
feel like in the hands of a lesser author, like, I feel like Gav Thorpe would have made him being like, fuck you, I fucking hate you, pounding my
Probably.
fists, and then I'm gonna beat you to death. You know what I mean?
Probably.
Like, I feel like, but then I feel like Chris Raitt writes them very reserved. There's a lot of anger there. They butt heads with one another, but to external people, they're very reserved. People just write them all very differently, and I feel like the wolves get the they get the biggest treatment on that, where it's very disparate, right, on how people portray them. I
I
do like what Chris Wright does with
I think
them.
the Dark Angels are the same. You can tell
I actually 100% agree.
you can tell who enjoys writing the Dark Angels and who does not.
Yeah, Thorpe.
Yeah, well, he's very good at it. He's very good at writing the Dark Angels, and so is Phil Kelly.
Agreed on both accounts. Like I'm not a huge Gav Thorpe fan, except for when he's writing the Dark Angels. I'm like, yes, more of this. I love everything that you do with them. But you're right, they can be very haughty, comically mustache twirly bad, or they can be, well, I guess they're always kind of haughty and arrogant, aren't they?
Yeah, that's kind of
But
their thing.
it's kind of their thing. We're gonna talk more about things in the Warhammer 40k universe in a second here. But I feel as though it really just does vary from author to author, and that's kind of, it's one of the good things, but also kind of one of the weird things. And this is definitely, Chris Wright is definitely just up and coming when he wrote this book.
Yes, you could tell this is very early. It was kind of like when reading Blood of Vasselheim and Stormcaller, you know, reading those, and then the Hellwinter Gates. Like, whoa, we can tell there's there's been some improvements, or you know, just the passage of time with someone's writing. It's just the way it is.
I feel that way about so many of ADB's early books.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, I wish I could write like this in my early.
Tell me about it. Yeah, I 100%. So here's the part where I kind of struggle with this book too. So the Wolves versus Thousand Suns is just a whole thing. And I know that it's not, there's no fault, but we see it a lot, and it really does come up a lot, especially recently with like the Curse of the Wolfen and everything. Recently, in the last like 6 years, it. Are you still like emotionally invested? Do you enjoy it? I know whose side quote unquote you take in the thing. Is it a little too much? I'm personally a little kind of over it.
So honestly, after reading Ashes of Prospero, I was like, you know, at this point, we need to be done. Because now Stormcaller knows the truth. Now the Thousand Suns that are still underneath there know the truth. They're able to bring those other space wolves, you know, back out of the labyrinth and bring them home. They know the truth. This needs to be done.
With you, I thought that book was them being like, and that chapter's closed now. Isn't that nice? And granted, I think this book comes out before that originally. But
this book came out like in maybe
10 or 11, or was it 09?
Hold on.
Hold please.
Yes.
But yes, and I feel bad for it because, like, have you ever gone back and you read? So I'll give you a really good example.
First published in 2011. And Ashes of Prospero came out like what, 2019, 2020. So, and the Wolfen came out in like 2016, 2017. So the Ashes of Prospero I thought was a very nice, we're done.
2018 is when Ashes of Prospero came out. But yes, and I felt, unfortunately with this book, so there's this book in the horror novel community. Like if you're at all into horror novels and you want to read one of the texts, there's a book called Burnt Offerings. And this is called an text for a reason. It basically, once you read this book, you realize that like 60% of horror movies take their blueprint from this book. Like you've read the story 16 times, you just didn't know it. But I went back and read it like 5 years ago, and reading it was like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. So like I've read this story like 15 times.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's not necessarily that author's fault that they wrote such a good blueprint for a horror story, especially the haunted house genre, which is my jam. Like it's not necessarily their fault for that, but unfortunately I have the misfortune of reading it later. So like for this one, going back and reading it, especially The Hunt for Magnus, I'm like, again, even though if I had read it chronologically, right? And like I think that's also kind of why I wrote Battle, like I memory hold Battle of the Fang. Again, I'm not kidding you. I was like halfway through the book when I was like, "Oh wait, this happens next." Oh, we read this book,
Hmm.
right? So much of it because I've just again, I think Ashes of Prospero was the like,
Right.
and we're done with that now. Apparently not.
Well, I mean, I hope we are.
God, I
But
hope so.
well, there hasn't been anything, with that since then. Um, yeah, because because we had the Wolfen, and that was like right when the Rift opened, when that was going on, because the Dark Angels have like nothing else to do besides you know go see what the wolves are doing and be like, hey, that's not right. And I love my Dark
Keeping
Angels.
secrets
I
from
love
the Imperium.
I,
How dare you?
I know I love the Dark Angels, but I'm not gonna be in this. I'm just like, y'all are y'all are. It's like, come on. This is
You are hypocriting hypocrites.
like a levels of petty even for you guys. Like, just calm calm down. Of course, like with the whole Curse of the Wolfen thing, I totally forgot the Alpha Legion had their hand in it, basically mucking everything up and like leading the Dark Angels here. I was like, oh, of course they did. If anyone's gonna want to
Else
start
would have.
if anyone's gonna want to start a civil war besides Demon Spawn, it's gonna be the Alpha Legion, and that's just for funsies. Uh, but yeah, I mean, so this book did come out first, ahead of all that. I think this is actually one of the early of the Space Marines battles books.
I think it was.
Yeah, and so then we have the Curse of the Wolfen, and then we have Ashes of Prospero. It's like, can we be done? Like Magnus, you can't tell me that Magnus has nothing better to do than to mess with the wolves.
Like, at this point, and we're going to talk about this here in a second, this is actually probably a good seg. I feel as though every few thousand years, he's like an angry spouse that comes into the room, like, and another thing. And like, this is probably the only book where I felt as though his, like, the revenge was well done. Like, that's pretty revengeful. And I
Honestly,
100% agree with you because that guy had no business. But what did you
so
think of his revenge? Like when it finally gets revealed what he's there to do, were you surprised at it? Did you think it was good,
so
justified?
I thought it was interesting when he told, I can't believe I didn't write this guy's name down. The sorcerer, not poor Raphael who got done dirty. But so Raphael, he was totally like, "We're doing this for revenge," and then the other sorcerer, Temek, that's his name. Temek was just like,
Temek.
"That's stupid. Like, we really need to move on from this." I'm like, "Yeah, Temek, I'm totally with you on this." And when he's telling Magnus, we shouldn't be doing this, he's like, this is not about revenge. It is, but it isn't. When he breaks the statue over his knee, okay, that was revenge, and that was a little petty. Do you feel better having broken the one of the toys? Like not him, but a
Why don't you
toy.
throw all your toys around the room, Magnus?
Seriously. But when it turned out it was thwarting this work that Wormblade was doing, I was like, huh, is this really just a no, you guys are going to be screwed up for the rest of your lives type thing? Or is this was he safeguarding what his father had done? And I have to wonder about that just because, when the Alpha Legion first saw some of the Alpha Legion, when they first saw the Primaris, they're like, you don't mess with what the Emperor did. So it's interesting in that aspect. And that was actually, one reason why a lot uh, of the Emperor's children even had issues with Fabius Bile, with what he was doing at the time. It's like, you don't mess with the Emperor's work. He had a plan. This is perfect. So I'll never know. Maybe we're not supposed to know what Magnus's true reason is, but that was just one thing I just had immediately thought of. Was like, was he safeguarding his father's work?
It's more of the former.
Possibly.
Only because I thought it was interesting in a couple of ways because when you think about it, he deals two pretty big blows, right? One, yeah, you guys are going to have unstable gene seed like we did. You're gonna have you're
Like
gonna be prone to mutations.
like the Blood Angels. They
There's a
have
lot of them.
but they all have the red thirst. They all have that risk of falling to the red thirst. And it's something like even in the Horus Heresy, I think it was in the Cygnus Prime book, which was Fear to Tread. When Horus accidentally witnesses it, and he tells Sanguinius, "You need to let our father know." Well, Sanguinius is so afraid that his father was like, "Do you remember what happened to the 2nd and the 11th? I don't want that to happen again." Which just makes you wonder, like, well, why was the 2nd 11th? Was it not that they were like, eating babies like we think because of what happened with the world eaters? Maybe it was like a really bad genetic mutation. That'd be interesting.
It could be, right? And there is always kind of that interesting undertone to the 40k lore of how many of them do have unstable gene seed.
Right.
Or
So you got the Blood Angels, you got 1,000 Suns, because that's how Magnus lost his eye, was to make his son stable. Made a bargain with the devil without really realizing it was the devil. And the Space Wolves. Does anybody else really have the unstable gene seed? Oh, the Emperor's children did. Because that's why they're called the Phoenician, because they were almost wiped out because they had an issue. Anybody else? I don't think so.
But that's, I mean, like when you look at statistically, that's quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
There's that, right? So I think that was kind of like you are going to forever be unstable. And I have figured out how your Imperium works. That's going to be your dirty little secret that you get to keep under wraps. But the biggest blow that he deals is, all the successor chapter nonsense. Not for you guys. Your gene seed's too unstable. They tried to do a few successor chapters for the Space Wolves, and they all failed spectacularly.
Well, because they even mentioned them, the Wolf Brothers, I think is what they were.
Yes.
And Magnus actually deposited some of them on this planet. But Ironhelm was like, "Well, we can't leave now. We got these guys here. We gotta kill them." Like, you guys are totally following Magnus's little playbook. I mean, it's like step 1, send dreams.
It was, but I thought, like, honestly, again, I am not a Thousand Suns fan. I am not a Thousand Suns fan. I definitely am Team Russ. Blah 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 blah. But when he did that, I was like, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually pretty good, and it was pretty wicked because if you go by the ancient Klingon phrase that revenge is best served cold, that was a pretty cold revenge.
And Fenris is
like,
cold.
It was cold on a few levels, but I'm like, that's pretty good. Like, I don't have anything bad to say about this as a revenge plot, because, and like, look, again, even though I am Team Russ and I'm not a Thousand Suns fan, Horus did do them dirty.
Yes, 100%.
So they were deserving of a little bit of revenge. They're continue then showing back up and being like, and now we've given you a hangnail. Like, that kind of stuff I'm not as much of a fan of, but this book I was like, well done. Well done. You waited 1,000 years and then we're like, BT dubs. It is, and yeah, the fact that I just did not like, I can't think of his name right now, but the guy who's working with the Canis Helix, like, I did not like him. Thank you. He was giving off way too many Fabulous Bill vibes.
Oh, yeah.
So anything that put that guy in place, I was like...
And Kristen, the best part was Bjorn at the end going, "That is not cool." And I never would have approved of something like that. Like, that... I'm kind of not angry with Magnus for destroying that. I mean, Bjorn is
not mad. He's just disappointed. No, I had that exact same moment when even Bjorn's like, okay. Like, I'm not happy what Magnus has done here, but I'm damn sure not pleased with that.
Like, you could have just said please. Like, I would have gone in there and done it. I mean, he even said he would have. Did you have to come in here and break all our shit?
Yeah, like, all you had to do is drop me a dream and I would have woken up and been like, gotta go downstairs for a few minutes. then I'll go back to sleep. Like, it's like Daddy's gonna fix some stuff. Can we also like the one thing that made me sad is I was like, well, that's all great, but then just like the sheer number of dreadnought violence in this book. They didn't all make it.
No, but
You
man,
texted me that this was the only time you were sad about a dreadnought that wasn't Bjorn.
I mean, I can't even remember his name. Like, why did I not write this down? Because I was like so sad. It was the one that that Freya had kind of like latched onto. And it was when she was kind of walking him back and he's like, you know, I gotta go. And she's like, I'm so sorry if I offended you. And if he turned around and said, you never offended me, and went, I was like, oh, Dreadnought. Like, got all emotional. Just want to give the big old cold box a hug.
Right. Like, come in. Like, now we have to hug for this. That is actually one of the things that I always find very interesting with the wolves, and Chris Raitt in particular does this where he always seems to want to have the wolves and like a person form a friendship. And I always like that particular piece from him. I just like when the Adeptus Astartes make friends in general.
They have a buddy cop movie. It's like a little buddy cop movie.
Pretty much. I'm a big fan. But I was a little shocked about like how many dreadnoughts get killed, because I was like, those are irreplaceable. Yeah.
Which actually makes me even all the more impressed. It was like, when Bjorn went over the side of the cliff, I was like, well, I know he's not dead because I've seen him in other books. But damn, son. And talk about a guy who's not allowed to die, Bjorn. He's still around 10,000 years later.
I think the other day, my husband and I were just having this weird debate, and I was like, who are like established characters with plot armor that you would legit be pissed if they died? And basically Bjorn was at the top of the list.
Yep. At this point, yep.
It would be so ignoble for him to die at this point. But like Kato Sicarius is one too, right? I still like to say Kato. Kato just sounds so weird.
You can't kill Kato Sicarius.
Kato Sicarius. No, you can't. Like, I would be legit. I don't even like Kato that much, except for that one book, and I would not react well.
No, I mean, yeah, he's got plot armor. I even think that even Dante, and maybe Mephiston, people would be very upset.
Well, yes. I can honestly say I don't think I would care if either one of those two died.
No, but you don't care about the Blood Angels either, so.
Correct. However, oddly, I'd be upset if Gabriel Seth died.
Because he's a flesh terror, that's why.
I'm really not that into the flesh terrors.
You like them more than the Blood Angels?
Fair. But I'd be a little sad. I'd be sad if from the friggin' Dark Angels.
Azrael?
Yes! Oh my god, I wanted to say that, and then for a second there I was like, that's the cat in Gargoyles, or in Smurfs.
Oh yeah, Azrael. He's the supreme Grand Master.
I would be sad if Azrael died. Like, because that guy is, again, like, no, you can't.
Oh my god, if Marnius Calgar dies.
Yeah.
That's not even funny.
Don't even talk about it. It's not even No.
Although I will say, if they kill off Reboot after bringing him back, I will be livid. Because what is the point then? You could have just left him in stasis.
Seriously. They can't. They just have to like move it very slowly now to get the whole band back together. But yeah, Bjorn, that was the other thing about reading older books that's kind of hard, is there's no
Ragnar
real
Blackmane. It's probably another.
Oh, I'd be sad if they killed Ragnar.
Yeah.
Especially after ascending him to Primaris.
Oh, did he?
that's the other thing that was a little hard about this, because like you mentioned, like Bjorn goes over the cliff and you're like, well, there's no sense of danger there. Like, he's gonna come back and be like, oh, I hurt my one remaining arm. All right, well, you're in Dreadnought anyway, so same old, same old. Like, there was no real sense of danger for that kind of stuff. Some of the other people who I'm like, okay, like you seem cool. Now I'm sad you're dead. But that's the only problem with reading some of these older books where it's like, certain characters we just know. You're not killing
yeah.
Bjorn in this book. Which is probably just, I think that's probably my biggest complaint about the whole Thousand Sons Space Wolves thing. They're never going to annihilate one another.
No.
Right? Like,
oh my God, can you imagine if they decided to like wipe out a founding legion? If Games Workshop's like, yeah, let's just get rid of them. No.
That is the start of the end of days of Warhammer 40k.
Right.
Like, when people got so upset with the when they blew up the old world to bring in Age of Sigmar, and everyone was like, it's the end of days for this property. And people thought that way about with Cadia too. When Cadia got destroyed, they were like, oh, here it goes, the end of days. And that could be right, but they're gonna slow burn it out, right? But yeah, if they destroy, like, again, I don't even really care about the Blood Angels or the Dark Angels. Like, I actively dislike the Dark Angels, but if they wiped them out, like, excuse you. I love that they're out there. I'm not emotionally invested in them and all, but I love that they're out there. But, and I say this a lot, I feel like there's other stories to tell with the wolves and the Thousand Sons that aren't about them hating each other and wanting revenge.
No, and there have been some, like the whole the Hellwinter Gate and the whole Ahriman stories. Well, there was that one time they did bring the wolves in, which was kind of funny.
Those reasons.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like, it's one of those things where they almost define each other.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's almost just like if you were to describe, like, oh, well, who are the Space Wolves? Well, they have a huge, like, long-standing beef with the Thousand Sons because they almost killed all of them. Like, it's one of their defining characteristics. And so it just doesn't make it all that. I just have a little bit of fatigue on that in general. And again, it's not like a thing against Chris Wraith. This is an old book.
No.
But
I get what you're saying. Like, we don't want to see the same grudge matches, like the Hatfields and McCoys. It gets old.
Yes, very much so. And like, there's just so many other stories that you can tell with both of these characters. We've even seen like interesting Thousand Sons stories that, brace yourself, don't involve the Space Wolves. Now, I do know that the Battle of Fang is like one of the famous things in their history, and it's part of the lore and blah, 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 blah. Like, great, good. I'm so glad I reread this. It is no longer memory hole in my brain, which is good. But I'm good for a while.
Yeah, I agree.
All the way good. Last question for you, though, on this book, because this has kind of been interesting to me. So, as you mentioned, like, the Wolfen was a whole thing, and like with the cracking of Cadia, like, there's been a lot of major events several years ago. Why publish this one now? I'm not complaining. It's I love it. It's very wintry. But why, though?
The only thing I think of is like the Black Library or Games Workshop has been, publishing or republishing older books. Suddenly, like the first one I ever saw was when they did Xenos.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, well, that's interesting. It's it's behind me too. And then what did we have? We had Storm of Iron. And then we recently had Nightbringer got a reprint, got a hardback reprint.
But not like not the shiny collector's edition like this, and nothing's gotten anything like Xenos got, or Armageddon, or
Cadian Blood. Cadian Blood is the new one.
Yes, but what was the other one? We went back and we read another older book because they had come out with a special edition of it. Maybe you're right. Maybe there's no rhyme or reason. Maybe they're just like, hey, we're just going to bring these back But the fact that they did this one and they did Armageddon, like, is this gonna be a pattern with the Space Marine Battles books?
Karn. That was what it was. Karn.
Maybe that is what I'm thinking about, yeah.
Because I just was looking at my because there's all my limited editions right back there. It's Karn.
Yeah, you're probably right. I'm looking at all of my special editions and I can't remember anything else it would have been. But yeah, like, it's an interesting thing, but it's interesting to me that they've now released 2 of the Space Marine Battle books. Maybe they're just beloved of classics that they were like, hey, let's, yay, fancy editions, more money.
I mean, they're about to do with Angels of Darkness. Same thing like what they did with Nightbringer, just kind of a 10-year anniversary hardback. So it's interesting. It's like almost like,
it is.
did you guys not have anything new in the pipeline? Or you just want to give these, really popular books some beloved limited edition treatment? Okay.
I mean, and maybe that's it. Maybe they just kind of have figured out that, hey, look, if we go and not that I'm pointing fingers directly and squarely at myself, but maybe if we go back and republish this book, people will read it again and who hadn't experienced it. I think of specifically Karn, right? Like, hey, we'll get people to go back and read this older story about these guys that they didn't remember, right? It's a really good, especially given the way that they publish and then like basically make it so that you can't get a book after it's been published for a while. It's an interesting way to be like, oh, by the way, oh my God, it's like the Disney Vault.
Ah, shit. Why'd you say that?
It just popped in there. It just popped in there for the youngins who don't remember that. Like all through the 80s and 90s, Disney would have this big, like, we are going to re-release Cinderella on VHS, but only for a limited time. And sure as shit, it would be out for like a year or maybe even 6 months and then gone.
My family we did that, harped on it. And then when they started
Everyone did, I think.
Well, and I did it again, when I
those
moved.
big, like, the big plastic cases on the VHS.
But then I did it again when I was in college, and they were bringing them into DVD. I'm like, hot damn! I still have
for the first time on DVD.
I still have all of them downstairs. They're really pretty cases too. But man, it was like they were out for like maybe 3 to 6 months. That was
and then they were gone. And then you couldn't buy it again until like 15, 20 years later when they would release it again. And they would go through the entire catalog like that. And now I'm starting to think that Black Library was like, not a bad idea, actually.
Yeah, so it's going to be really funny when they come out with Black Library Plus and everything's going to be on there. And we pay like $10 a month.
Right, so that you can go and watch just whatever.
And read all the books.
Like if they ever put that on Warhammer Plus, where they're like, yeah, just whatever. If it was written more than 5 years ago, whatever. There you go. Unless we're going to put out a special edition of it. But I was glad that we went and we did some of the Wayback Machine. I feel as though it's always kind of fun to be like, okay, we've read something new. Now we're going to go in the Wayback Machine and now new. And then I like that. It does help kind of, it makes them a little breezier. Well, it passes the time.
And I have War of the Fang in paperback. And I always meant to read it. Well, that was giving me a reason to read it, I guess. Now I own 2 copies. Like a chump.
Oh, do you want me to go get my Battle of the Fang? It's an old one. Like, I feel you. But this is just kind of what it is to be a Black Library fan?
I guess. We do it all for you guys, okay?
All for you.
I'm
excited, though, because our next book is, well, it kind of checks a lot of boxes. I don't have mine physically. It is Wrath of the Lost by Chris Forrester.
I have it.
New author. We don't often see the Flesh Terrors having their own book, which I think is kind of exciting.
It's because they're pissy. It's because they're pissy.
I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but yes.
They're just the angry blood angels.
They were like, you guys don't go hard enough. But we will.
Yeah, but they're not, but they don't go as hard as the blood drinkers did. All right. There is that.
I don't know. They are like, I always joke that the flesh terrors are like the edge lordiest of edge lord things. Like, and
Yeah, but
I'm very excited to read it.
they
I really am.
survived the Great Purge of the devastation of Baal.
I mean, oh, that chapter? It got devoured.
I mean,
Exactly that.
literally.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they are now Tyranid poop on the highway.
Do they poop?
I don't know, but that's oddly gonna bother me for the rest of the night. I'm not gonna lie to you.
I mean,
But anyways,
they're insects, so they must.
Wrath of the Lost is next. By Chris Forrester, who I don't think we've read anything by him yet. So this is
No,
exciting.
I don't
I
think
always like when we get a new author. I'm like, ooh.
I've never heard of it. I mean, he's probably written some random, let's see, probably written some random short story or something in Inferno or something that I wouldn't have read. Let's see what the back of the book
Probably.
says. He wrote a short story called Postulant. Oh, it's in the Chthonia's Reckoning anthology.
Oh, okay.
So,
Well, like I keep thinking we found like Mike Brooks was a great addition. Robert Rath was a great addition. I like all this getting new blood in there. Like let's see
I
where
mean,
this
I like
goes.
Denny Flowers.
Yeah.
Eduardo Albert.
He's fun too. Oh my god, Eduardo Albert. Kazarkin's gonna be that's gonna be up there for a while.
Yeah, every now and then I still think of stuff that was in Kazarkin. It's like it lives in my head rent free.
The dinner scene is not gonna leave my brain for a what. My sentient sausage is behind me now.
Oh, well, see, now that the cat's on the table, it is definitely time to go.
You want to take us out, Carrie?
I think I sure will. First, she starts knocking off stuff, because that's what cats do, people. So you've listened to the Warhammer 40k Book Club episode regarding War of the Fang by Chris Raitt. Be sure to join us next time for Wrath of the Lost. Here, I will show my copy again, since Jen doesn't have a copy. I
have a cat.
Yeah, well, you do have a cat. We are an unofficial book club and not affiliated with the Black Library or any of its affiliates. You can find both the vidcast and podcast on our website, WH40kbookclub.com. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, give a review, and all those good things to the vidcast on YouTube or the podcast anywhere you get podcasts. Our site also has articles about adventures in reading other Warhammer 40k books and short stories outside of the book club books. So please stay a while and read from a crag. Yeah, I guess I'm still off Arius.
Face. She is purring.
She looks like she's very angry.
She is. I wish I could like put the mic up to her so you could hear how loud this animal is purring right now. She's a weirdo.
Well, that's cats for you. All right.
Pretty much. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.